Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Safety Management Summit meeting. My name is Sandra, and I will be moderating today's call. Our speaker today is Thomas Peretik, Senior Safety and Risk Manager, Belk, Inc., presenting Duty of Care Premise Liability Risk Mitigation. We will turn to the presentation in just a moment, but first I want to go over the web conference instructions. Everyone is currently in mute so that the background noise does not become distracting for the other participants. To view today's presentation as the screens change live, you may go to the link that was sent to you in your reminder email. Once in there, you may click anywhere on the page. Everyone see the pop-up with the option to make a comment? Feel free to ask questions. We'll make sure all of your questions are answered. For the newer participants in the group, it might be useful to review benefits you can take advantage of as a member at no additional charge. First are the live monthly web conference meetings, which you've already dialed into today. I hope you find these useful, and we have an excellent lineup, which you can see by going to our website's schedule page. Second, we do record all of these, so if you are traveling or stuck in another meeting, simply log in at your leisure and the full archives of past meetings are available to you with a number of interesting topics. Third, get to know the other members. By logging in, you can see all of their profiles, and we are glad to make any introductions if wished. Fourth, if you are wrestling with any key issues or decisions, we strongly encourage you to reach out to the other members. Also, our site makes it very easy to post questions. The seniority and experience of your fellow members makes this the best possible forum to get advice from others who have probably dealt with the same issues and can give you sound advice on what worked and what did not. Fifth, we really encourage site visits. If you've not visited others' offices to have a great discussion on best practices and see their facilities, please do so. You can log in to see the other members' companies and cities, so feel free to reach out, or as mentioned, we are happy to make introductions. Sixth, we also generate executive summaries of meetings, including the key takeaways and learning nuggets so that you can reference them and put them right into action. Seventh, our members are very busy, so we started a service where we pick out the top 6 most interesting articles among thousands at hundreds of sites to keep you abreast and ensure you don't miss the key ones. Lastly is our Book of the Month summary that you can either read or listen to as you commute. Each month we will be selecting the most interesting book, then summarizing the ideas, so within minutes you can absorb the key takeaways. There are many other benefits, of course, but I just wanted to highlight some and keep a lookout in your inbox for a number of these each month. That takes care of the housekeeping items. If you'll just give me a few moments to now pull up the speaker's presentation and introduce him. Okay, all set. Now before I turn the call over, I would like to tell you a little bit about our speaker today. Thomas Peretik is the Senior Safety and Risk Manager at Belk, Inc., overseeing safety and risk programs for a company of over 26,000 employees with revenues of more than $4 billion. Before Belk, he held various positions as a Manager of Safety and Security for General Nutrition Centers, Director of Allied Security, Safety and Insurance Manager for IKEA North America, and Director of Risk Management for Wesleyan North America. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Criminology and Pre-Law with a minor in Business Administration at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. You may read Tom's full bio sent to you in your reminder email. Tom, thank you so much for being with us today. Just say next when you wish the slides to advance, and the floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to wish everyone good afternoon. It's rather interesting hearing different people's bios and seeing where they've come from with their degrees and so forth. But for many of us, I guess, in the safety industry or risk management industry, a lot of that comes from our valuable past experiences. And I always kind of refer back to those commercials we see on TV recently. That being Farmers Insurance. See a thing or two, and I think we all can relate to that in our industry. And if anybody would have told me today that the insurance industry has the best commercials out there, being the funniest, most entertaining, I probably wouldn't believe you. But with Allstate and Mayhem and Paint Manning with Nationwide, I think we're all in good hands with communicating how important safety is and insurance is to everybody out in the world there. So what I want to do is talk today a little bit about the duty of care, premise liability risk management from past experiences and some key factors that can protect you as a company out there. So on the next screen, as we flip to it, there are three establishments that we have to look at here, which you're going to be judged upon, especially if you go to court. And I want to kind of get through these basic terms of definitions to give you a better understanding of what, once again, you're going to be judged upon. So the first criteria is the duty of care, and it's the requirement that a person acts towards others and the public with a watchful attention, caution, prudence, that a reasonable person in the circumstance would use. And if a person's actions does not meet that more important standard of care, then the acts are considered negligent, and any damage resultant may be claimed in a lawsuit of negligence. So once again, standard of care is one that is the elements that they will be key focused on if you would go to litigation in a premise liability accident case. The next slide, establishing liability, is defining the standard of care, which is the other pedestal of negligence. And it's the watchfulness, attention, and caution and prudence that a reasonable person in the circumstance would exercise. And if a person's actions, does not meet that standard of care, then his or her acts fail to meet the duty of care, which all people supposedly have towards others. Failure to meet the standard, is negligence, and any damage resulting therefore may be claimed in a lawsuit by the injured party. The problem here is that the standard is often a subjective issue upon which a reasonable person can offer. And really, this is really the main core that everything is looked upon, especially in jury trials, and what your attorneys would do in cases, whether they want to take up the case or not, if the company wants to pursue litigation and to fight these certain claims. So in the next slide, negligence is the last outcome, and of course it's a failure to exercise the care towards others which a reasonable or prudent person would do in circumstances, and take action which such a reasonable person would do. And this is where the value of the claim will hit, or the amount of money that could be levied upon a company. And so this all wraps up into what will happen in a premise liability case if someone would get injured, whether inside your property or outside. Next slide. So what you see here is the hazards. And in a lot of terms, you'll hear the premise liability claims people in risk management or even attorneys will mention, open and obvious. Is this something open and obvious? So as you look at the first picture in the upper left corner, it looks like a pothole. A pothole in the middle of the street is one thing with no pedestrian crossing. But in this case, as you can see that this is a main pathway. And so, as you look at these pictures, for a safety person out there, you'll look and say, hey, someone can get hurt. And, we all visit places over the weekend. We go shopping at different places. And as we walk and look at certain things, it's amazing what your background is and what your eyes catch a hold of. And in some cases, your work never is done. I mean, you can be on vacation, and as you walk by something, you'll look and go, boy, someone can trip over that. Oh, I'm on vacation. Stay focused. So for that, you'll see it for that reason. But then, for risk managers, they'll look and say, well, that's a claim in a liability. It can also be, important to the company. And of course, for a person that actually gets involved in these accidents, depending on their demeanor, it could be an opportunity. An opportunity, unfortunately, someone can get seriously injured, or a potential fraud case where they see an opportunity that they can take advantage of. And for attorneys out there, as we all know, it's work for them, and that's why we have them. And so when you look at that one case there, that's clearly an open obvious where someone can get injured. To the bottom, over to the right there, you can see the foot. You can see that ledge is lifted up a lot higher with a slab of cement. Many of us have seen this. It's famous with trees growing by, whether maple or oak trees. And unfortunately, this could be common in some of the rural areas out there where, you know, whether you have facilities or maintenance or township boroughs that are responsible for public or private properties, this has always been a challenge. And what might be acceptable or the norm in some areas will definitely not be for others. You know, put this in the situation of a major city, New York, California, it's a huge liability, and many would unfortunately take advantage of that. So as you walk around and see things like this is where you come across, does that meet the BOCO or International Building Code standards? There's a lot of standards for which they can use, attorneys would use and say, yeah, this does not, meet the standard that should be for sidewalks. And someone definitely can get injured, and you should have known about that. On the bottom left is the sidewalk. Again, it shows a slight lip, but is that really open and obvious? You can make an argument and say no, because most people wouldn't see it. It doesn't stick out as obvious to that point. And most people, when they walk, do pick up their feet. If you look at someone that's elderly in age, they tend to shuffle. The bottom left picture most definitely could cause that person to trip. Most other people, maybe not. So when you look at these hazards, they kind of give you a picture of the certain degree for which they're judged upon. The next slide. Another open and obvious, premise liability. This is a water meter. Maybe it's walking across to going into a building, office building. But, there will be questions asked about this, and we'll get into it as we get in the next slide, but who owns the property and so forth. And the grate there, can a car fall down into that? So when you look at these pictures and other situations you may come across, the next slide, as we flip to, you'll have to ask a couple questions. These are things that you would want to ask. Do we have responsibility for this area? Is it a leased property, or do we own it? Landlord-tenant leases, they're written a lot of different ways. Depending on your building, ABC company may own to the edge of the curb. They may own just to the edge of the door coming into the building on those leased properties. Some properties you may own the one side of the parking lot, but you don't own the other side of the parking lot. So it's very important to really understand in all your properties, whether you own one or you own over 300, what is your duty and what do you have ownership over? Was prior notice ever given to some of these hazards? And that could be good or bad, and we'll get into that more. Work orders, inspections. Prior to, were there prior accidents involved in the specific areas? So, when you look at things like that, we can take an example where someone falls, Jane Doe falls on your site. You don't own the property, but you find out there's a hazard there. Maybe it's the first time you come across it. So as the manager of that location or facility manager or the safety manager, an email is sent to mall management or sent to the owners of the property, letting them know that someone has fallen on their property and that there's this issue. We hope that they rectify it rather quickly. Sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But whose responsibility is it to block off that potential hazard so no one else futurely gets injured? That falls on, once again, the landlord and mall management. Do they have a maintenance group? If you own the property, then, you have a duty to ensure that no one else gets injured there. So what steps have you taken? And, I caution with emails. I mean, you can state the facts, but I would watch, once again, how those emails are worded. Once again, all this stuff can be subpoenaed in court. And the last thing you want is an email to be subpoenaed that says, well, yeah, we would really like to fix that hazard, but unfortunately we don't have enough money in our budget. Or, hey, that's going to cost, $10,000 and, we just quite don't have that in our funds yet to do. Those things don't fare well, and I can tell you they don't fare well in front of a jury when the Plans Council is basically stating, okay, you got a company that makes $8 billion and they can't spend $10,000 to fix something that's clearly a hazard. You can see where this is going in a lot of these cases. If any of you have done depositions or have stood trial to testify, these are those questions that are often asked. Is the documented routine outside inspections conducted, and how often? And, we're looking at this in terms of, let's say you own the property. Who does those inspections? Is it the safety department? Is it the facilities department? And, do you say what you say and do what you say? In other words, hopefully we're doing them and no one's pencil whipping those. What kind of programs do you have in place? Do you have some type of quality assurance or auditing that back checks that to make sure that these are being done correctly? That's another important factor. Does your current safety training programs cover these types of hazards? I've been asked in court before, why didn't you have in your training X or Y? And a lot of times, you could sit there and write 7 pages of hazards based on what type of industry you're in. And, really the important part is you got to make it very simplistic and understandable for your workers and associates out there. Going on with 7 pages of possible hazards in the workforce, can do a couple things, in court. It's very hard for those people to remember everything. And so sometimes it's better to say, hey, we have the best safe practices out there, and our best safe practices are based on the industry average accidents or the most common accidents in these industries. So, you look at that as part of your program as you look at your inspections of your ground outside the building. Is there surveillance covering the area? That's always important. Is it currently working? Hopefully it is, because it could be a false sense of security, and there's been lawsuits filed against companies that have not fixed their equipment in a timely, routinely manner. How much history does it store on surveillance videos? 2 weeks, 6 months? They refer to that as terabytes in the systems that record. What's the speed rate or the frame rate per second of your video, if you do have video, outside the buildings? Very important. You want to go within the 15-30 frames per second, because some of us that have seen videos in the past, does it look like the person's walking normally, smoothly, and is it not choppiness? Note that the average person, it covers about 4 feet per second. And more critical in this is that, video doesn't lie. I mean, it can help you and it can hurt you in these cases. But, take, for instance, a slip. There's a difference between a slip on video and just rolling the ankle. I've had cases in the past where claimants have claimed they have slipped and fell, but maybe water wasn't found on the floor, or no liquid was found on the floor. And lo and behold, the video actually shows that the ankle turned outward or inward. And frames per second will actually show that, and someone that is very good in forensics video can easily blow that up and show a jury the difference between a slip and a rolled ankle. So something to reach out if you have security to see, really how's the timing of their video equipment. Spoilization issues, that unfortunately that could be something that can hurt you, where something was deleted. Maybe your system can record up to 6 months, but the incident that happened just happened last week, and you got video of it, but all of a sudden, right before that person had that incident, the video kind of lapsed out. And so there could be cause for claims against spoilization, which definitely does not help your case. So these are some of the basic things that you can look at, that can help you with premise liability cases. And a lot of this, I tell everybody, is watered down negligence, to the point where, in front of a jury's eyes, they'll sit there and say, well, what more can a company do to ensure the safety of their customers or their associates or coworkers? When they see things like this, you're doing the right thing. You're giving a good faith effort, and you're doing it as well as anybody else can in terms of welcoming people on your property. Next slide. So another type of hazards, we'll just move it inside a building. Same thing applies. You have open and obvious. These are some pictures that I've staged, some areas to give you a kind of example. So for the far left picture is your compact area with suitcases. Now, I know the safety people out there will look at this and say, I see a trip hazard. But for a normal worker or associate, would they know that that's a hazard in the way that it's sitting right now? Would they know to push the product up in front to maybe the peripheral vision of the customer, or somebody walking your store wouldn't trip over that? Somebody else that can look might sit there on a visual side or on a store layout side, could sit there and say, okay, why is the compact area of the suitcase sitting out further than the shelving unit that's behind it in line of sight? So once again, a good prosecuting attorney will sit there and say, most people will walk along an item and their vision tells them, okay, it's only 2 feet away from me. And as they keep walking, they're not expecting something to be stuck out a little further. It's not flush. It's not what they call line of sight down through merchandising. So that one there, you can possibly make an argument it's not open and obvious. But to the right, you have a situation where, okay, there's stuff on the floor, a housekeeping issue. It is open and obvious, but there's certain degrees to which this hazard established itself. Did this just fall off the shelf? Did a customer touch it and make it come off the shelf within the last 5 minutes? And then Jane Doe walked by and tripped on it. Yeah, it's an accident. A claim could be filed as sure, and then, of course, litigation. It can go either way. But if video is captured here that shows associates walking by it and not picking it up, and let's say it goes on for an hour or 2 or 3 and 3 different managers walk by it, and then Jane Doe falls over it, that one's going to be a lot tougher to defend because, once again, your safety programs out there hopefully has slip, trip, and fall hazards and outline certain items, just plain items on the floor that could be a hazard that needs to be picked up on a routine basis. Some industries out there, especially in the retail sector, have things what they call floor sweeps or floor safety checks. And, those programs are great. And if your policy states that every day you do one at 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 8 o'clock, for an example, you better be doing it as defined, because an example being, if, Joe works the shift in the morning and fails to do the first 2 safety sweeps or safety checks and hasn't have it documented, and let's say the next person comes by and on the shift and doesn't do it as well, but Jane Doe falls, then the attorneys can turn back and say, okay, you guys have a policy or a process in place, but you failed to do it, and there's documentation of it. And if you combine that with camera footage, that really makes it tough. So there's always good and bad to programs out there. And, I always err on the side of, not writing War and Peace when it comes to a manual, because it's more that you can be pegged down in court on. But more importantly, open and obvious, and things that are in terms of best safe practices that are in general safety terms for the industry is a lot easier to defend than things that are specific. Next slide. So the same things you'll be asking yourself as outside premise liability as inside premise liability is, how long was the hazard in place? And do we document those routines of inspections, or how often do we conduct them? We talked about the open walk, pre-shift inspections, field verification, do what you say what you do, and you don't want to pencil it. But do you have something else that's behind that? Is there internal audit or commercial review? Is there somebody else checking to make sure that what we do as a standard is being upheld? Prior accidents involving specific areas. If it's the first time that accident has happened ever in that hazard, that's one thing. But boy, if we had 2 or 3 accidents over that same exact area or that same hazard, once again, that does not make things better, and it could also fall on the side of negligence based on what other documents could be subpoenaed in court that would support that. Does your current safety training program cover these hazards? Once again, take a look at all that. Surveillance covering these areas. Same thing. Is it currently working? check to make sure that, how much history can be stored on these units in frames per second. And also you want to note, these things can help or hurt you in the case, once again, as I said. And spoilization is another issue. So whether you're in the retail industry, it's out in the mall, factories, industrial plants, a parking lot is a parking lot, depending on, what your industry is. The more public it is, the more open it is to the public, the higher risk, of course, you're going to be held at. So they are the things that, I just wanted to speak about briefly today. And you can hit the last slide. The overall awareness is, important. So I always ask people how their day is going. And so things like this that are plain and obvious may not be in this case. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tom. We really enjoyed your presentation. Before I go out and check the chat line of questions submitted, do we have any live questions? Again, it is *6 to unmute your line and go ahead with your questions, or a reminder that you can also click anywhere on this last slide, then you will see how to make a comment. So you can type your question if wished. So again, any live questions? Okay, Tom, we have received several questions throughout your presentation. Keep in mind you may have touched on these, but I'll ask them all anyway, just in case there's something you would like to add to or elaborate on. Okay, our first question, just because the landlord might be responsible for a hazard on the property where you do business, doesn't mean you can't be held liable alongside the landlord, does it?
Yes, you can be, and once again, I spoke on a couple law firms on this with other law firms. Good attorneys will sue everybody and anybody, and I can tell you in past cases, a good attorney, and we'll just give you a quick example. If you saw on the ABC site, they will not only sue the company, they'll sue the mall, and if they can tie it into any type of township borough, they will. Especially on where the property line lie at. So, all because, you don't own the property doesn't completely release you from the liability. You still have the duty to inform that landlord of the hazard to the point where you would document it. Now, I didn't expand on this, but I'll expand a little bit more. What can you do as a possible remedy to that? In some cases, once again, you got to confer to your attorneys on this, especially real estate attorneys, and how your landlord-tenant leases are written up. There is an out there where you can use CAM charges, your rental charges that you would normally give to your landlord, you would apply to that hazard if they do not respond quick enough. We've done that in the past in a number of cases. You will see cases like this in some where roofing replacements have to be done because the roofs are leaking so bad that they are creating hazards, not only to the hazard of a slip, trip, and fall in the stores, but even possible business interruption and types of business, problems you may have. So to answer your question, once again, you could be held just as long with the landlord in that. But your insurance company will most definitely will be fighting that to tender that claim on to the landlord. Okay, thank you for that. Our next question, what role should a corporate attorney play in these matters, or is their role just to deal with any legal actions filed against the company? Well, once again, it depends how your legal counsel is set up in different companies. In our company, of course, we have our general counsel and a number of groups that handle certain types of laws. But when it's involved in insurance issues, some companies will rely on the carrier's attorneys. There's a selected group of attorneys we have that we use, that we partner, that represent our company. So you can use the attorneys, and they're more specialized in expertise in this area, working with the carriers because they know the line of business and they have, especially my recommendation would be, if you don't have that experience as a general counsel for a corporate office, to definitely partner with those law firms. They have contacts, they have forensic accountants, they have experts that can look into different types of information on those accidents, and a lot more resources that can support you.
Okay, thank you. Our next question, and it's a two-part question. Does it matter whether trained safety people make the inspections and walk the floor and grounds looking for problems? Can anyone do it and offer the company some level of protection?
Good question. So, let me see. I'm going to see how I want to answer this. So, the more expertise you have somebody doing the inspection, the easier it is for the attorney to make his case against the company with the jury. So, an example being, let's say I was up on stand and my responsibility for ABC Company is to go around to check the grounds to make sure that there's no hazards there. And so, there was a hazard, let's just say there was a hazard out there with a sidewalk or with steps. And with the steps, there's definitely an elevation problem with the rise of the step, or there's some crumbling that for a safety person would easily be able to identify as a hazard because of our years of experience and maybe past knowledge. So that person up on the stand would have a harder time to defend themselves why they didn't see that as a hazard when they really should have known that it was a hazard. So let's take that same example and apply it with a facility person, or just let's apply it to a manager, a sales manager, an office manager. The office manager is only as good as what has been given to him to outline what meets the criteria of a hazard. And this kind of goes a little bit in the past to what I said in my presentation, where, safety professionals out there, we try to say, hey, let's look at the best safe practices out there. Huge potholes, falling down railings, huge cracks in sidewalks. Maybe there's, depending on your area where you live, if you're up in the north and you have that freezing and thawing, you can have some cement curbways break away. Things that like that are pretty easy to identify as maybe best safe practices out there to see. But in terms of other things, a store manager or office manager, it would be really hard to pinpoint other type of hazards that would be easily seen by a safety professional out there. So if that person would have to sit up on the stand and testify of a hazard that was out in his area, it'd be easier for the defense counsel or there's attorneys to help support him and say, look, this is the training that we provide our people. And of course they would subpoena it and they would see how many pages. And if it doesn't specifically say that in black and white, you get a little more gray area and you get a little more leeway with the jury in terms of how much you really are being liable for or what you really should have known. And so in those cases, and once again, we didn't get involved in this in the conversation, but there's other outside factors to litigation, and then it's the way the jury's set up and where does it sit in terms of each state has liability percentages out there, and a lot of people in the insurance industry and the claims industry know this, but there are some venues that are more conservative and others are more liberal in certain states and jurisdictions. So, that has a lot to do to it as well. In the eyes of the jury, some will sit there and say, well, you know what, it's an accident, the person fell, and we feel that, they make a lot of money in that company, so they should pay for the claim. That's more, could be a liberal approach where the conservative side will turn around and say, well, you know what, it was plain and obvious, it's out there in the open. A person should have their own due diligence when walking to make sure that, they're walking in this safe manner. Why were they not walking on the sidewalk? Why were they cutting across the parking lot when that's not the crossing lane, the proper crossing lane? Why did Jane Doe take the shopping cart off the curb when there was an ADA 11% ramp that was only 15 feet away? Would not the common sense person take that avenue? So I know it's a long answer, but I try to give as many examples to give a picture to try to distinguish between the two.
Okay, thank you for that. Now our last question. Well, with all of your vast experience in various industries, where do you see most companies failing with their safety policies and training?
Well, I think where most companies struggle is, and it's unfortunate, I think businesses are changing out there. We're trying to become more leaner, more profitable. We're trying to do more with less, and that puts a strain on a lot of things where, maybe a certain business focus may be this, but, safety, a lot of safety people out there may feel that, hey, we need to make safety more important or should be looked upon more as a focus. And that's always a challenge. And when you don't have enough resources and budgets, that's where it becomes more difficult for, companies to do it. So I think, the biggest challenge out there is, and especially we're not even getting involved with the generation gap there is, the millenniums, Generation X and Y. I mean, there's such a long bandwidth of how people learn. The younger generation learns one way, people up in their 50s learn better another way. And so it's very challenging for safety professionals out there is, how do you create a program that can be understood by that long range of employees, out there. And to me, I think it's not so much as a monetary or time factor. I just think it's a change of times, and whether you're in safety or management or no matter what you're trying to communicate out there or teach, that seems to be the biggest challenge is how these groups all work together and how you can produce a product out there that can be easily understood by all.
All right, Tom, I think we have covered everyone's questions. Do you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom you would like to share before we end our summit today?
I think the one thing I could be really thankful for is I started in the security industry, and pretty much I got involved with safety and in insurance and risk management because when I overseen a company looking at the P&L, I saw things like workers' comp premium, D&O coverages, property insurance, and it was a lot of money. And for a lot of companies, insurance is one of the major costs. And looking at that, I was like, wow, that's a lot of money. But I also found out that there's ways that you can control and save money, which was my job at the time, to run a profitable security company. And getting involved in that into the roots of it, finding out how you can manage workers' comp better and manage your property claims and mitigate or lessen your risk out there to save money, kind of opened the avenue to other types of the industry. And so I went from security and then into safety, pre-loss, post-loss, as risk management, and along in the property side, which goes into, fire systems and things like that, and flood insurances and roofing and engineering behind it. It really, for me, gave me a wealth of knowledge to hit a bunch of different areas. And so when I work with different departments within our big company here, I can communicate and I can relate to their problems rather easily because, example being with asset protection or loss prevention, if you're on the retail side and you're making apprehensions, or if you're on security on the securing a property, I kind of been there, so I understand some of the challenges that they do, and so I'm better well connected with that group. But then I'm also connected with the safety folks out there because I know that, hey, if we really did a good job, we wouldn't need claims managers. We wouldn't even need risk management because we would mitigate those risks because we'd have the best programs out there that it would never happen. And then, unfortunately, we know accidents happen, so then I go into this risk management role with insurance and seeing how the cost and how things like that work. And so if I can give any advice out there, I mean, if you have an opportunity to go to some seminars on workers' comp or risk management or property insurance, it's pretty eye-opening.
Tom, simply wonderful thoughts.
Yep.
On behalf of all of the executives on the line, I'd like to thank you for sharing such powerful ideas and key thoughts with us today. Your involvement and dedication to our profession sets a high benchmark for others to follow. For all of the participants on today's call, thank you for your continued membership and insightful questions for today's speaker. The meeting is now officially concluded. Tom, thank you so much again, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you.